What happened? Zack opened his eyes, slamming them shut immediately as pain lanced through his head. His hand raced to his temple to soothe the throbbing. I feel like I got hit by a truck. He slowly managed to sit up and pry open his eyes. What the heck? He stood up, staggering a bit as his head pounded. He glanced around, his gaze settling on a prone figure. He cautiously moved over to her. The girl shifted and groaned. With his nerves wound so tightly, he flinched and stepped back, internally berating himself. She opened her eyes and sat up, looking around the small room. Her golden eyes landed on him, and he felt a shiver travel down his spine. She didn't look much older than him, maybe 20, but her gaze seemed heavy, like she'd seen enough of this world already. "What is going on?" she asked. He shrugged. "I don't know. I'm in the same boat as you, I'm sure." At that moment, a buzzer sounded from outside the room, drawing their attention. "Thank you for participating in our event. In a moment, you will be directed to the arena where you will begin. Do not be alarmed." The voice reverberated through the small space, slicing into the heads of the young adults. They were given no time to recover before the room began to shake. Both of them were thrown to the ground. Pain shot up Zack's arm as he landed. He winced and dropped to his shoulder. Finally, the shaking stopped, and they gingerly picked themselves back up. One of the walls slid open, and the opposite wall began to move, forcing them to step out of the familiar space. Both immediately wished for the safety of the plane room. In front of them was a glass wall, with staircases to the right and left. Through the glass they could see a massive arena that was divided into 3 sections, each of which held several different structures that were difficult to see clearly. "Please use your designated staircase," the voice boomed again. "Our designated staircase?" Zack glanced around. "What does that mean?" The girl shot him an annoyed look. "Really? Look above the arches." He frowned but complied. Above the left staircase, an inscription read, "In this direction goes the one whose skills lie in the cerebral plane." A similar one, on the right staircase, read, "In this direction goes the one whose skills lie in the physical plane." "Oh, I see." He turned to the girl, but she was already moving towards the left arch. "Hey, where are you going?" She turned and raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, searching for a response. "Shouldn't we talk about this?" He spread his arms. "We've been thrown into this with no warning or idea of what the hell is going on." He placed his hands on his hips. "You aren't worried in the slightest?" "Well, let's think about this, shall we?" She mimicked his gesture, throwing her hands apart. "We don't know what's going on. There's a strange voice telling us what to do and forcing us to do it when we won't." She dropped her arms, placing one hand on her hip and gesturing with the other. "We obviously were brought here for a purpose, and, as far as I can tell, there's only one way to figure out what that is. Did I miss anything?" Zack frowned. "No, but isn't there something we should do?" "Like what? Find something to beat up?" Zack narrowed his eyes. He wasn't about to let her know, but that was what he had been hoping for. It would be a quick and easy way to escape their predicament and maybe get some answers. "Not necessarily. But is there anything better than just jumping into their plan?" She shrugged. "Dunno, but if you find something, let me know." She continued walking toward the left stairway. He huffed, but turned to the other path. He ventured down the stairs. At the bottom, he came to a room that was filled with various weapons and tools. A desk against the far wall caught his attention, and he weaved through the rows. On the desk was a piece of paper, a square piece of glass embedded into the wood, and a small round piece of equipment. He picked up the paper, scanning it quickly. It read, "In this portion of the challenge, you will need speed, strength, and resilience. From this room, you may choose 2 weapons to take into the arena. Choose wisely, as they will determine your success or failure. On this desk is an earpiece. Place it in your ear. This is necessary for you to win. If it is lost or damaged, you will have a severe disadvantage that may cost you the game. When you have selected your weapons, place your hand on the desk scanner." Zack dropped the paper and grabbed the tech, placing it in his ear. Immediately, he could hear the sound of muttering and paper shuffling. Ignoring the random noises in his ear, he ventured through the room, hefting and testing weapons, and rereading the instructions. He finally settled on a slender but strong dagger and a curved scimitar. The sheaths and straps for the blades quickly followed, and he buckled them over his street clothes. Taking one last look around the room, he placed his hand on the desk scanner. The wall behind the desk shuttered and slid open, revealing another room filled with racks of clothes and weapons. He sheepishly removed the sheaths and browsed the room. Soon he found a set of comfortable but practical clothes and a pair of boots his size. Suddenly, the muttering in his ear turned into a shriek. He clamped a hand to the pane and staggered back. One of the racks made contact with his back. Landing on his knees, stumbled forward, landing on his knees with a grunt. Previously upright, a weapon fell and smacked his head and right shoulder. And smacked his head and right shoulder. What the hell was that? He sat down and rubbed his new bruises. A glance at the weapons behind him provided some relief. They were varying lengths of stout wood, probably quarterstaffs, so no cuts. Zack gingerly stood and rubbed the back of his head. His fingers encountered a tender bump, and he growled, like he didn't have enough pain already. He tentatively massaged his shoulder, and gave it a few experimental movements. A dull ache clung to the injured site, but nothing obviously major. He breathed a sigh of relief. The sounds in his ear had died down, and he proceeded with his shopping, picking up a pair of fingerless gloves. Reattaching the weapons proved to be more difficult with an aching shoulder, but he managed to get it done in an acceptable time frame. Still nursing his injury, he scanned the room for another door. While no door was readily apparent, a glass square was embedded in the wall, similar to the one on the desk. He moved over to it and offered it his hand. The outline of a door became visible in the wall, quickly sliding open to reveal a dark room. He hesitantly stepped through the doorway, wincing as it slid shut behind him. Blinding light suddenly intensified the pain in his head, and he threw his good arm up to block his eyes. Peering past his protective limb, he surveyed the room in front of him. It was small, too small to be considered a room, but the farthest wall was made of opaque glass. Red numbers appeared on it, counting down from 3 minutes. Zack took the opportunity to breathe deeply and nurse his shoulder. He grimaced and regretted his stupid mistake. Slowly stretching and massaging it drew expressions onto his face that anyone with him might have found comical. A buzzer sounded, causing him to flinch and squeeze his injured limb. He groaned and swore softly, looking up. The timer was flashing zeros, and the glass had raised about 6 feet off the ground. "Are you all right?" his forgotten earpiece asked. "What?" He pressed his hand against it to hear better. "Ugh! I asked if you were all right, but never mind. Obviously you're fine." He recognized the condescending tone as the girl that he had woken up with. He grimaced at that line of thought. It sounded weird to say it that way. Maybe the girl that had yelled at him. Yeah, that sounded better. More like the annoying person that he imagined her to be. "Did you get that?" "Did I get what?" he asked. A long, exasperated sigh rang through his earpiece. "Why couldn't I have a competent partner?" she muttered. "Have you started yet?" she asked, not giving him a chance to respond to the insult. He remained silent. "I'm going to take that as a no," she announced. He heard the shuffling of papers. "That's good. We need to strategize." Not speaking, he pushed off the wall and crept toward the opening. On the other side, he could see an enormous room that probably qualified more as an arena. There were several tall towers that could be seen in the distance, but his field of view was largely taken up by a huge wooden fence. It was unremarkable except for the fact that it had one entrance that funneled from the glass wall until it took a sharp turn, blocking his view. "What the hell is going on?" he muttered under his breath, trying to process the new information. "That doesn't matter right now. What does matter is that apparently we need to pass a series of tests here," she answered, papers still shuffling. "Seriously? Like a pen and paper type of test? What is this, college?" "It looks like the first test is a simple maze," she continued, ignoring him. "That should be easy." Stepping through the doors, Zack was reluctantly inclined to agree with her. He placed a hand against the rough wood and began walking. Immediately after the first bend, he was faced with a choice. Without skipping a beat, he turned right and continued, tuning out the muttering in his ear. He followed the twists and turns, taking a right, another right, and a left. Suddenly the ground under his foot disappeared, forcing a blood-curdling scream from his throat. Instinctively, he threw himself backwards and twisted, his upper torso landing on hard ground, but momentum forcing his lower half into the pit that had opened up underneath him. He grunted, scrabbling for purchase on the smooth ground as he slowly slid over the edge. His downward momentum finally ceased when his armpits reached the ledge, allowing him to hang from his arms. His sword banged against the back of his legs, making him thankful he had grabbed a sheath. He panted heavily, grateful for the brief respite, but the adrenaline of the situation was causing him to shake and slip. "What was that?" a worried voice spoke into his ear. He ignored her, refocusing all of his efforts on gaining ground instead of losing it. Slowly, he managed to hoist himself up enough to get a leg over the edge. Rolling away from the drop, he lay immobile, breathing heavily. What happened? Her voice had an edge of panic to it. Nothing major, just almost fell into the depths of hell, he replied weakly, throwing an arm over his eyes and groaning. What? Are you okay? Give me a few minutes, I'll be fine. Well, in that case, Paper shuffled, serves you right for jumping into action without making a plan. He removed his arm and squinted. Excuse me? Did you listen to anything I've said in the past few minutes? She replied tersely. He hesitated for a second. Not exactly. Uh-huh. That's what I thought. I was telling you exactly what we're supposed to do. Ugh, of course you were. He sat up, wincing in pain. He crawled over to the pit that he had narrowly avoided. It seemed deep, but that could be because light didn't reach further than 10 feet down. The hole spanned the width of the pathway and extended on for 2 meters past the initial steep drop, too far for someone to jump even if they were expecting it. You ready to play by the rules? No, but I don't have a choice, Zack mumbled and stood, stretching out several muscles to relieve them of the tension from clinging to life. He sighed. Okay, what am I supposed to do? Go back to the beginning. I can lead you from there. She sounded smug. He hated that she sounded so smug. Fine. Hesitating a moment, he began walking. Every intersection caused him to pause, and he had to backtrack once before finally winding up at the entrance. I'm here. Now what? Took you long enough, she muttered, barely audible. First things first, she announced before he could retort. Look at the first intersection and tell me what you see. He whispered under his breath. I see 2 paths that go in different directions, he said sourly. A pause. Really? That's all you're gonna say? What do you want from me? He yelled, throwing his hand in the air, then balling his fists in anger at the useless gesture. Another pause. If we're gonna get out of here, we need to work together. Getting angry isn't gonna help, she replied softly. His anger deflated, replaced by guilt and frustration. What the hell is going on? He spat out through gritted teeth. I don't know, but from what I can figure, the only way for us to get out of here is to get through these tests. She hesitated before resuming. And to do that, we need to trust each other and work together. He breathed deep. Okay, what do I need to do? He managed to get out. Tell me what you see, she repeated patiently. Okay, there's not much to these walls, just a few scuff marks every now and then. Everything else is unremarkable. He peered closer at the scratches. Scuff marks? She muttered, paper shuffling. Yeah, on both sides. One side has 3 dashes stacked on top of each other, and the other side, he scurried to the other wall, has a jagged oval with a line through it. Good! Go the directions of the dashes, she said excitedly. Zack cocked his head quizzically but followed instructions. He wandered through a few twists and turns. Tell me when you hit the next intersection. He rolled his eyes but did not respond. It didn't take long before he had to make a choice. Once again, he looked for the scuff marks, and once again she excitedly told him which way to go. Other than necessary interactions, they did not speak, but traveled in silence. Suddenly, he turned and the walls ended, leading to a large enclosed area. Directly in front of him, 2 poles stretched high into the air, ending just above a platform about 10 meters off the ground. Along the poles were hooks that protruded at even intervals all the way up. Off to the right was a medium-sized slender pole that was tipped with rubber and had roughed grips in the middle. Well, I'm out of the maze, he announced, taking in his environment, especially the tall poles. Well, that's a relief. I'd run out of material. What do you see? He quickly explained it to her and heard the rustling of papers again. This one seems relatively easy. You just have to make it up the ladder and make sure you don't hit certain rungs. Zack's face paled. Say that one more time, he breathed, staring at the contraption in front of him. He could hear the frown in her voice. You just have to climb the ladder and miss certain rungs. Why? He closed his eyes and breathed deeply. Okay, which rungs do I have to miss? He began doing a series of complicated stretches. Let's see. She mumbled incoherently for a moment. Don't use rungs 5, 10, 12, or it looks like 18? He grimaced. Of course, couldn't be the lower ones, he muttered. What happens if I hit them? He asked, eyeing the smaller pole. I have no idea, but judging from the past, it won't be pleasant. He huffed a sigh and cracked his neck. Okay, let's do this. He walked over to the rubber-tipped pole and found a pouch of chalk with a strap attached. He belted it on, making sure that it hung on his hip, and lightly dusted his hands. Hefting the metal and adjusting his grip, he squared up to the twin poles. Here goes nothing. I'm gonna need you to keep track of which one I'm on. I'm not gonna be able to. Okay, I guess I can do that. She sounded concerned, but he chalked it up to nerves. He took a deep breath and raised the bar, sliding it onto the first 2 rungs. He pulled himself up as far as possible. Once he hit the apex of his arc, he swung the bar up and over the next set of rungs, allowing himself to hang at his full length. 1. His sword swung with his movement, but he forced himself to ignore it. Another breath, another effort. 2. 3. 4. He heaved himself up again. Wait! Startled, he almost lost his grip on the pole. What do you want? He panted. His injured shoulder throbbed, and he readjusted his grip. You need to remember to skip this one. He looked up and groaned. How was he supposed to do that? Wait, is there anything about how I have to do this? Not that I can see. Why? Perfect. He reached out with his feet and stepped onto the rungs on either side. He pushed himself up and practically threw the pole up 2 notches. He hung from the bar and readjusted his feet, throwing it upward again. He laughed. This was so much easier. He stepped up and reached to throw it. Suddenly he was falling. He quickly reached forward with the bar and caught the rungs, nearly jerking the bar out of his hands when his weight hit it. He yelled as his shoulder wrenched and began shooting pain up his arm. What happened? Zack glanced down to confirm his suspicions. I think the rungs that we aren't supposed to hit disappear when they feel weight. He shifted slightly, feeling pain in his shoulder. And I think I hit one. Uh-oh. Are you alright? Yeah. The fact that I was cheating helped. If I'd been doing it normally, I would have fallen. He glanced down. And probably fallen hard. Can you keep going? Do I have a choice? We've got to get out of here. She was silent. That's what I thought. Okay, I'm on rung 7. They continued up the ladder, both conventionally and unconventionally, until they reached the platform. He swung off of the bar, landing heavily and dropping to his knees. He gripped his shoulder, trying to keep it from moving. It throbbed painfully, occasionally sending shooting pain down into his fingertips and up his neck. To all contestants, please refrain from fraudulent, deceitful, or otherwise underhanded behavior. This is your only warning. A hidden loudspeaker crackled. He grinned slightly. Think that was for us. She let out a nervous chuckle. He tried to stand, but fell, panting heavily as his arm moved. He grunted in pain, clutching his injury. What happened? He grinned through gritted teeth. What is that? Your catchphrase? She huffed slightly. Are you okay? I'm fine. He forced himself to stand, clenching his teeth against the sudden movement. The platform led to a plastic enclosed slide that looked extremely out of place in the deadly arena. The dark, opaque plastic kept light out, giving Zack the impression of a black hole. Is this going to be a ride into a pit of acid? He mumbled, massaging his shoulder. It was feeling better so long as he limited its movement. There was no response, which caught him by surprise. He never thought that she would miss an opportunity to prove him wrong. He cautiously entered the slide and allowed himself to move down. The rubber soles of his shoes kept him from speeding through the darkened slide, which was just fine by him. If he moved slowly, he had less of a chance of death by whatever lay in wait at the bottom. The ride was shorter than he expected, but then he had half expected for it to just keep going and drop him into the pits of hell. The slide ended abruptly, dropping him onto a flexible floor designed to lessen his impact, for which he was grateful. He landed crouched, using his good arm to balance. He stood and looked around. This room was rather small, but had a high ceiling. The wall opposite the slide rose up nearly 60 feet, not quite meeting the roof. It was not a flat surface, but rather had many ledges and overhangs. Small dark shapes dotted the wall, forming no specific pattern. Of course, he muttered. It's a climbing wall. A climbing wall, huh? This one might be tricky. Why wouldn't it be? That ruins the fun, doesn't it? He griped. Do you see any numbers anywhere? She asked distractedly. I don't know. Hang on. He moved over to the wall, reaching out a hand to stabilize himself against it. Yeah, each handhold is labeled with a number. Oh, dear. Okay, you have to wait a bit. Relax and gain some strength. I've got a bit of work to do. Papers shuffled again. He sighed and sat against one of the walls. I don't know if I can do this one, he mused, staring at the high wall. He reached up and massaged his injured shoulder, pressing deep into the tissue. He grit his teeth against the pain, knowing that it was worth having partial use of his arm. Why do you say that? She asked half-heartedly, papers still rattling. Just a hunch. I have a guess as to what this next challenge is, and I'm not a fan of it. He leaned his head back and closed his eyes. They sat in near silence, broken only by muttering and shuffling papers. Yes! I think I've got it! She startled him out of a doze. He jerked up and banged his head against the wall. He rubbed it ruefully. Got what? We can start the challenge if you're up to it. He took a deep breath and stood, testing his shoulder. Okay, let's get this over with. The wall looked ominous as Zack stepped up to it. So, what is the trick with this one? I'm not 100% sure, honestly. I know that these numbers are significant somehow. Well, thanks for that confidence. No problem, glad to help. He could almost hear a smile in her voice, but it was gone in an instant. The first number is 27. Do you see one like that near you? He glanced around. Yeah, I do. He examined it. It looks normal to me. That's good. What about number 39? He reported the same thing. This is promising. She rattled off the next few numbers. These ones should be safe if I understand correctly. Zack groaned and began climbing. He avoided using his right arm as much as possible, allowing his shoulder to rest. Every few feet he had to stop and confirm which ones he could use. Midway up the wall, it began to invert, forcing him to use both arms. Okay, the next safe one is 68, she announced softly, allowing him to concentrate. He looked up at the next one and groaned. Why is it so far away? He reached out, his shoulder burning. He grabbed hold of it, but immediately felt something sharp stab into his finger. Ouch! Instinctively, he curled up, shielding his hand as he examined it. His middle finger was bleeding from a small puncture. It was beginning to throb, and he rubbed it on his pants to get rid of the blood. Are you sure that one was safe? He asked. I'm pretty sure. Hang on. His muscles trembled in the cramped position he was in. Oh no, sorry, it's 70. He bit back a curse and reached for the handhold. His throbbing finger pained him, but he pushed it out of his mind, along with the pain in his entire body. Slowly she guided him through the difficult climb until he was nearly to the top. He panted, his fingers dangerously weak and calves cramping as he clung to the wall. He looked up. Only 3 more to go, and he would be finished with this death trap. 305, 310, and 330. Those should be the last 3. Her voice was strained with concentration and anxiety. He pushed himself up again, reaching for the next one. Left foot. Right foot. Left hand. Right hand. Ignore the screaming shoulder. Ignore the cramped muscles. All that mattered was getting to the top. Suddenly, he threw his arm over the edge, following it up with another arm and a leg. Exhausted, he lay flat on the ledge, rolling away from the long drop. Is it over? She asked quietly. It's over, he whispered. He looked up just in time to see a man walk out with a syringe in hand. 3 others followed him with a bed on wheels between them. It's all over, he managed as the man injected him. He weakly tried to fight back, but they muscled him onto the gurney just as he blacked out. He heard her sigh of relief as they carted him away.